Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If people don't know me, I am Sarah Browne. I'm the Deputy Director of Nursing, and yes, it was my photo that they managed to get hold of in Andy's presentation earlier today, much to my embarrassment. Unfortunately, I did give it over, not quite realising at the time what it was for, so in case people are recognising me now. This afternoon we're going through being open, duty of candour. How many of you so far have done the online training? Fantastic. Right, I'm going to go now, okay, because you can all teach me what it's on. Basically, it's a recap. I've then got at the end of it, I found on your seats that there's some scenarios that we're just going to talk through. Now, these are real life scenarios that we have handled in SEPT, and I'll talk through how we've come to those decisions at the end of each one. And what we'll just do is wait to see, what I want to see is what people think about the scenarios. And I've obviously been a little bit, cheeky in some of it, is that I haven't given you all the information, which is often the way when you first start looking at things. You don't know all the information and then you investigate and find out a bit more. We are going to ask you, because it's being filmed today, that I will obviously give you the opportunity to ask questions, but if possible, can you save up your questions till at the end rather than ask questions as we go along. So what we'll do is I'll whiz through the presentation, then answer any questions that you have, and then we'll go through the scenarios and then get your feedback from that. So I'm afraid you're working this afternoon as well as me, especially after lunch. So background, where does duty of candour come from? Any ideas? A few murmurings? Yeah. So mainly it was a recommendation of the Francis Inquiry. Obviously having the mid-staff thing down the right-hand side there was probably a bit of a clue for you as well. So obviously it's where it came from, and it was a government decision for a statutory duty on providers rather than individuals. So you'll probably be pleased to know that each one of you can't be taken to court individually around duty of candour, but the trust can be taken to court, and there is a fine. I don't know if people know what the fine is, that our commissioners can fine us for each breach of duty of candour. Now we have commissioners in the room, so I'm hoping the commissioner in the room might actually know. £10. Yeah. So there is quite a fine for us. If you think how many patients go through our services, if we breach duty of candour with every single patient, that could be obviously an awful lot of money. But obviously that's not the purpose of it around it. The purpose of it is about us being open to actually identify perhaps when we've been at fault, or actually what the real purpose of it is really just to say we're sorry that things haven't gone right and we want to look into it to learn lessons from it. It's not saying we're really sorry we've caused you harm, and that's where everybody initially was really worried about. It really is just saying we're sorry that something's happened, we want to investigate, to look into it, to find out is there's any learning from the trust that we can take forward to stop this happening to someone else, and that's the real purpose behind it. So obviously one of the new 12 fundamental standards set by the CQC, and I have at the end, if people want, I've got both the Care Quality Commission guidance on duty of candour, as well as the joint NMC and General Medical Council guidance as well on duty of candour, as they've come together with a statement for it. And as I said, it's now part of the national contract. So one of the parts of our national contract that we sign up to all of our commissioners with is around duty of candour. So it was actually a contractual duty since 2013, which people think it's very new, but we are now in 2016, so it's actually been there for 3 years, but most people have only really heard of it since the Francis recommendations were taken forward. And it came into force in November 2014 as a regulation statutory duty, so that's now where we could be taken to court. But obviously there's also now the professional duty. Our code of conduct has been updated, so there's talk about it in our code of conduct about being open and transparent with our patients, and also, as I said, there is this joint statement from the NMC and the GMC. So if you're not aware, it applies to all healthcare providers and services registered with the CQC, and a breach of the duty can be enforced by the CQC. And the registered person, which is the trust, may be liable for prosecution. And what it talks about is that we just need to act in an open and transparent way with service users in relation to care and treatment. So that's what the purpose of it is just about being open and transparent. Talking to patients about what's happened, what's going on, and any deviation to care or treatment, just being open and upfront right at the beginning. And I think when people first saw this come in, they thought there'd be an absolute massive increase in litigation, but we haven't seen that. In fact, quite often when you do sit down with relatives or patients themselves and speak to them about issues, what they quite often want when you speak doing root cause analysis with them or dealing with complaints is that they just want to know things will change or that things will be different for the next person coming along. They quite often aren't after litigation and money side of things, so they just want to see that we are learning from it. So what is the specific statutory duty? It's where a notifiable safety incident has occurred, a health service body must, as soon as reasonably practicable, I like putting this language in, notify the service user in person that a notifiable safety incident has occurred and apologise, provide an accurate account of all the facts, advise the service user what further inquiries into incidents are appropriate, and provide reasonable support to the service user. Is there a time frame? What's the time frame?
The first time frame is as soon as possible after the event, and then is it 10 days?
Right, it's interesting because I struggled everywhere just recently finding where I got 10 working days from. The CQC initial guidance that came out talked about 10 working days, following it up in writing within 10 working days. The more recent CQC guidance talks about that guidance, but then doesn't actually put in any more 10 working days. The contract doesn't mention 10 working days, but our policy and procedure is still stipulating 10 working days. And I think what we're saying is that we're going to keep to that, because obviously the longer it takes for you to have that initial conversation, then follow it up in writing, you're not being open and transparent with people, because all we're doing initially is just saying something's not right here or something's happened and we want to investigate it. That's all we're saying when we do that initial apology. It's not that we've got all the answers at that point, so that's why we will stick to the 10 working days. But when you go looking for it, it's not easy to find anymore. And that's where you do the follow-up with written notification. So what is a notifiable safety incident? So it's unintended or unexpected incident that occurred in respect of a service user during the provision of a regulated activity that in the reasonable opinion, and that's the interesting bit, the reasonable opinion of a healthcare professional could result or appears to have resulted in death of a service user where the death relates directly to the incident, or severe harm, moderate harm or prolonged psychological harm to the service user. So this is why when we ask you to report, we then ask you the question around duty of candour, and that's why I'll talk about that a bit more as we go through the scenarios, but that's why sometimes decisions are made slightly different to others, because it's all to do, again, in the reasonable opinion of a health professional. So we can give reasons as to why we don't think the duty of candour applies, and we'll talk through one of the scenarios. It could have gone either way as to whether or not we thought it applied, and I'll explain why we thought it definitely did apply rather than it didn't apply. So what do we mean by severe harm, moderate harm, prolonged psychological use? So should we start off with moderate harm? So it's the same threshold as the same as used in the contractual duty. Psychological harm talks about it needed to last for at least 28 days. That's a bit more of a difficult one, I think, to contend with, but that's when they talk about any psychological harm that could have caused to a patient is that it has to have occurred for more than 28 days. Moderate harm is obviously significant but not permanent harm, and the definition is things like unplanned return to surgery, unplanned readmission, a prolonged episode of care, extra time in hospital or as an outpatient. So this is where we could talk for ages around pressure ulcers. A pressure ulcer actually at the end of it potentially gives a prolonged episode of care and extra time in hospital or as an outpatient, but actually we have as an organisation gone down the route that we're not automatically doing duty of candour with every single pressure ulcer, because actually we're only doing it for those that we deem to be avoidable, because it's trying to go through that process with people. Cancelling of treatment or transfer to another treatment area such as intensive care. So hopefully just keep those things in your mind as you go through the scenarios a bit later, because that'll help you. Severe harm I think is a little bit easier to define, unfortunately. Permanent lessening of bodily, sensory, motor, psychological, spelt wrong, or intellectual functions, including removal of the wrong limb or organ or brain damage. So a lot of these come under the never events. Have people heard of never events when we talk about reporting? And obviously death, I don't think I need to explain to anyone what death means. The interesting thing here is that obviously where death relates directly to the incident rather than the natural cause of the service user's illness or underlying condition. So how do we demonstrate compliance? We need to have board level commitment to openness and transparency, and obviously the board has committed to that, and we have made the training mandatory for all staff going forward. Have to practice procedures to encourage openness and transparency, make all reasonable efforts to ensure all staff operate within the culture of openness and transparency, staff understand their responsibilities, systems in place to support identification and reporting, and if staff have not acted in accordance with duty of candour, consider disciplinary action. Obviously that isn't the first route we're just going to go down, automatically is disciplinary action, but it's if people deliberately don't go down that route and refuse to go down that route, then of course disciplinary action may come into place. So some fundamental standards are enforceable through criminal prosecution. Like I said, there's the CQC guidance that's been updated, and it's largely related to technical requirements. And there's also been talk about incentivising the duty of candour. So obviously our proportion of the NHSLA that we have to pay for around our litigation, they were talking about we may lose a proportion of that cover if we can't show that we have been candid and taken duty of candour forward. So it does affect us financially if we don't enforce it. Just to give you a little bit of an idea though of what we do in the trust, because obviously you're all using Datex, I'm sure you're all using Datex, and that's how we're taking duty, how we follow duty of candour. So hopefully, do you all sign off Datex? Yeah, so the majority of people here. So when you're signing off a Datex, you decide the level of harm. And if you put it down as moderate or severe, there should be a little box come up that says, have you considered duty of candour? And then you question that as well, and we ask you to tick that. On a Monday morning, there's about 4 of us that sit down every Monday morning and go through every single moderate incident reported through Datex to decide whether or not we think it meets duty of candour requirements and whether further investigation is required. So you think nothing happens sometimes to those Datex reports once you sign them off. There is more that happens. So on that Monday morning meeting, we've already talked about serious incidents, so we've already looked at the severe harm ones and identified potential serious incidents. We then have a further meeting where we look through, like I said, all the moderate harms and also the ones, there's a new area on Datex now where you tick for escalation. We also review all of those as well because we're questioning why are you asking for it to be escalated? Does it go up to the exec team? Or otherwise, is it that we're wanting to find out more information or does it need investigation? And you're beginning to find that we are asking more questions coming back to you as soon as you tick either of those boxes now so that we can question what's happened around it.
So can I just... I'm asking.
Yeah, so hold. So that's what we're doing at the moment around duty of candour to look at it. So what we will do, so it's being run through the SI office, the Serious Incident Office. So Sharan Johal, unfortunately, at the moment is on sick leave. So Chris Bradley Rush is covering the SI office. So he's sort of running that with myself and other people as well. So they will contact you via Datex, and we're doing it all via Datex emails now so that we've got a central base of where everything is being stored and we can review what's been happening. And we will come back to you with those questions. Now, if we think it potentially is a critical incident, we will then come out and ask you to investigate it as a critical incident, and also what's being done around duty of candour. Have you spoken to the family? And if so, can then support you with a letter in writing out to the family. Now, we did initially do templates around those letters, but templates are templates, they don't routinely work for every situation. So we do have some templates there that we can say to you, would this work in your situation? Or otherwise, have a look at it and then come back to us. So we're there to support you with those letters and support you around taking this forward. So that's no problem. So I will just open it up to any questions that people have before we look at the scenarios, because I think going through the scenarios will probably pose a few more questions. And then probably help us to discuss it. Yeah, there's been some upgrades to Datex. Katrina King isn't in the room today, so she'd be able to be the best person to go through it all, but there's been some upgrades. So one is that you've got that area now for escalation. What Katrina will then do is if it's asking for escalation back to the other organisation, she will then contact the other organisation. You should then get a feedback message from her to say that we've referred it onto the other organisation, and then once we've heard anything back from them, you'll get that feedback message. But they've also opened up the area on Datex that as things get closed off, whoever's reported that data should also get a feedback mechanism as well to say what's happened about it and what's been learnt from it. And we're really trying to identify, it's the learning bit of it that is so vitally important so that we can then take it forward. There is. For people that aren't aware, there is national contract in regards and serious incident framework. So we now have 60 working days to do a root cause analysis from the time of reporting that incident. Sounds a long time. It has been extended, but what I'll remind people is that we used to have 45 days to do the investigation and then 10 days to do the action plan. We now have 60 days to do the investigation and the action plan. So we've only gained 5 working days actually. So that's why as soon as we report an incident, we do send out a commissioning email to try and get an investigating team together. And if there is a delay, that does cause us problems, because what we're then trying to do is, I don't know, has everybody here undertaken a serious incident investigation? Probably not, but there's been a number of you that have. What we then do is we now have a panel review. So once you've undertaken your investigation, there's a panel review with the medical director, the director of the service, Andy Brogan, the exec nurse, and as well as the ops director, myself, Leslie Cullen, and the SI people that go through that report with you. You come in and present that report with the other investigator, and we go through the findings of that report to identify how we really identified the right learning and the right recommendations. So that meeting has to be held. Sometimes further work's needed before the report can then go off to commissioners. So we are on a very tight timescale. So the initial time that you are given from the SI office is to allow all of that to go on. But it is quite tight, and we are aware of that. Now, we can ask for extensions from our commissioners, and we are having regular meetings with our commissioners around SI so that they're aware of what's going on. But we have recently had real issues with keeping 2 timescales, and a lot of that has been around the allocation of the investigators to begin with. Okay, there are 3 scenarios, so you can work, I think I've tried to do it, each row has the same scenario. There's one around a patient who was catheterised, there's one around secure services, which is why I didn't give Andy the secure services one, because he'd know that one too well, of a patient who drank something that they shouldn't have done, and there's a third one which is around a diabetic patient. So just going to give you 5 minutes to discuss whether or not, and what I'm asking you to look at is look at the incident. First of all, think whether or not you think it perhaps would require an investigation, and if so, is it a serious incident? So just thinking back to your terminology of moderate and severe harm, and then also whether or not you think duty of candour would have applied there or not. Are we ready to go through? Good to have quite a lot of discussion. Hope that's been useful. What I am going to do is just go through each scenario. I'm going to ask you for what you've felt from your different groups. And I will just reiterate it, because obviously, as we said, this is being filmed just so that people don't think I'm repeating everything that you're saying. There is a reason for it. So scenario 1, and as I said, it hasn't given you all the details, but quite often this is more details than we do get on your day texts. So just remember that. Okay, so when you get us coming back after our Monday morning meeting, when we've read however many moderate incidents there have been across the trust, normally works out between 5 and 20, just so that you get an idea of numbers. 5 to 20 incidents we review on a Monday morning, just depending what's happened. But that's why quite often we come back asking further questions, because there's not enough information, unfortunately, on your day text for us to make that decision and see where we've got to take it forward. So scenario 1 is a patient who was a planned admission, this is where you're going to say you didn't tell us this, a planned admission onto a mental health ward for a change of medication. I'm trying to think which medication it was. Clozapine initiation, there we go. Do you know this? There you go. Patient prior to admission, completely independent in his insulin management, would titrate depending on his blood sugars, was admitted to hospital. Insulin was prescribed by the doctor. Initially wasn't prescribed correctly to what the patient thought they should have. Nurse went to administer because the insulin was taken off the patient because they were concerned about the risk status on the unit for the patient to self-administer, so insulin taken off and for nurse to administer the insulin. Patient refused the insulin because Okay. Yeah, patient refused insulin because they felt it wasn't the right level of dose for them. At the time, there was some questions going on about the patient's mental state, because were they right about refusing the insulin? They appeared a little bit confused, etc. Family weren't happy either. Patient self-discharged, and just prior to discharge, family said, I'm taking him to A&E. I'm not going to tell you what happened in A&E. What do people think so far? Did this meet serious incident criteria or critical incident criteria? Did it need further investigation? Was duty of candour applicable? Okay. This came in as a complaint, and when we looked into it, we were then very concerned about this complaint, and it was taken forward as a serious incident investigation, and we went back to the family and have had real involvement with the family to learn from this. The reason why the patient appeared confused wasn't anything to do with their mental health status. Lots of murmurings around the room. Does anybody want to explain? Yeah, blood sugars. So people were automatically presuming their mental health status wasn't correct, but actually it was his blood sugars were going off because he was refusing his insulin because it wasn't right for his blood sugars, and there was a delay in getting the right prescription, etc. Patient was taken to A&E and was admitted overnight into the hospital to get his blood sugars maintained. So obviously that has now been taken forward as a serious incident. We didn't follow duty of candour initially because it wasn't initially reported in the correct way. It was picked up through the diabetic nurse from either in our community or the acute hospital, who reported it to us via Datex, so that's where we followed it up. Okay. Scenario 2. Now there's some people in the room that know this one very well. No, you don't? Patient in secure services. Patient was on level 3 observations. For those who don't know what level 3 observation means, they have to be within eyesight. So they're obviously in our secure services, obviously concerns about their mental health, that they are a risk to themselves and therefore on level 3 within eyesight. They picked up a bottle of limescale remover that had been left unattended in the communal area and took one gulp from the bottle. Patient reported that she was having difficulty swallowing and that her throat was closing. She was transferred to A&E and she was spent 48 hours in Basildon General Hospital. So who was looking at that scenario? Hopefully it was some community people rather than just mental health people. So.
I said yes, yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. Actually, because it's secure services, things are a little bit different. Secure services have extra areas that we always have to report. So at any time that they have to take a patient off secure services site, it has to get reported as a serious incident. So it's a little bit different. But basically, this was the reason why we said yes to duty of candour. Now, self-harm quite often in our secure services, we don't automatically go forward with duty of candour. Any ideas why or thoughts around that? Should we or shouldn't we? Exactly, it depends on the individual situation because of their mental illness, sometimes they will do things to get attention and to have needing further care, etc. So the problem with that is that if they deliberately self-harm, we've had patients recently swallow a toothbrush, I believe, and we didn't go down duty of candour with that one because that was a deliberate intention, that they wanted to swallow that toothbrush to get to hospital to have some further attention, etc. So duty of candour didn't apply. So it's difficult to know sometimes with some of our secure service patients whether or not duty of candour really applies. For this one, we did do duty of candour to I think it was a lady, wasn't it? Yeah. Lady's mother, because that trolley was left unattended. So that patient shouldn't have been able to get hold of that limescale remover. But unfortunately, there's normally 2 domestics. That day there was only 1. It's always a way, isn't it? And literally within seconds, I don't work obviously in the ward areas all the time, but we find it in learning disabilities as well. They're very quick, these patients, and very observant. So they will, whatever opportunity they will get, they will take these things if they can. So because of that, yes, it was taken forward as a duty of candour, and also because they required acute admission to hospital and care in the acute, it was taken forward as a serious incident. Okay, and this one is where a lot of people are going to cringe in the room when I give you the further information, I'm afraid. But patient in the community, catheter removed The plan was to trial them without catheter, so quite often we have patients discharged from the acute hospital with a catheter in. We obviously don't want patients to have catheters in, risk of UTIs, urinary tract infections, so we will, as much as possible, try and remove catheters of patients. So this was a planned trial. Nurse, very detailed Datex that the nurse explained fully about the trial without catheter, explained what to do, when to ring back, etc. Patient phoned back, not passing urine properly. Nurse went back out again, same nurse, recatheterised. Urine initially drained, but straight away, followed by blood. Datex then clearly showed that they then inflated the balloon, but the patient continued to bleed. So she then decided to take the catheter out. Patient continued to bleed quite profusely. Ambulance was called and the patient was taken to hospital. Who was doing that one? Quite a few of you. I think I must have been rather keen in giving that one out, having gone around the room. What did people think? Did it meet critical incident or serious incident criteria due to Candour? Okay, so over here we think it needed investigating and duty of candour did apply. Over here, you're asking all the right questions. Guess what the Datex didn't tell us? Any of that. The important piece of people notice is look when the Datex was reported. Yeah. So what do you think might have happened for it to be a late Datex reporting? Okay, thankfully the patient didn't die. Complaint. Yep. So it came in actually as a PALS inquiry. So the nurse did as we're saying undertook. Now if I now tell you it was a male patient, okay, who had a catheter in, when the complaint came in and we checked, well, the staff involved checked the batch codes, a female catheter had been used. Okay.
Yeah, you want to have Candour, doesn't it?
Okay.
You know the full story.
Okay. To be fair, as you start looking through this, and I think this is learning, I think, a bit wider for our community health services, because there's often that you're going out, I mean, people may know my background is in spinal injuries. I was used to male catheterisation left, right and centre, and I used to train male catheterisation. And yes, you can have difficulties catheterising people and you can occasionally have bleeding. But from the Datex reporting, it was profuse bleeding. So much so that they'd wrapped a towel, etc., and called an ambulance, and the family were really worried, etc. Sorry, yeah. So when you start looking at it, there was definitely something there we hadn't done right. And like I said, duty of candour isn't to say that we have caused harm. Duty of candour is to apologise, to say, whatever's happened today with your catheter didn't go as we planned. We're sorry, we're now going to investigate it. That's what duty of candour means. Yes, you are saying we apologise for the fact that you had to go to hospital, and we're now going to investigate to see is there any learning to take forward. That's what duty of candour means. It doesn't mean we're sorry we catheterised you with a female catheter when it should have been a male catheter. So actually going back, that's deliberately why I didn't give you all the information, because even if it was a male catheter that they used on that person, the fact that something happened, and it does depend on their history, because if their background is that they had enlarged prostate or they had problems, etc. But my question then would again, was that nurse competent in doing that catheter? You know, had it been agreed for that trial without catheter? So it's just going back to that, you know, the reason for duty of candour is just to say to people, something's not gone right here, we're going to investigate it and we will come back to you once we've investigated it to see what else is needed. Please let us know if you want to be involved in the investigation. So it's not been reported as a serious incident at this time. Now we might, once we've completed the critical incident review, decide it does meet serious incident criteria. I don't think it will, because it's obvious that this gentleman obviously did have a problem. He had a catheter in the first place. I'm going to jump to the conclusion that he was elderly, because I'm sure he was from what else is on the Datex, and therefore he probably has got some medical conditions that has caused that problem there. But it's the fact that I think how we dealt with it at the time is just that wider learning to say that duty of candour, we feel that duty of candour is applicable in that situation. So, any questions from anyone? Yeah, I think there's different things going on because we're obviously a very large organisation. I think there is different pockets of work going on in different places. So all serious incidents and all critical incidents now that are being taken forward. So this last one scenario I've given you is a critical incident. That will still go through what's called our Learning Oversight Subcommittee. So once that report is completed, it will go through Learning Oversight Subcommittee, and the quality newsletters that you may have seen, there's been 2 or 3 of, we're beginning to try and capture some learnings in those that will be coming out to different areas. But also the idea of your representations at that Learning Oversight Subcommittee will then take it through to your local quality ones. But I think there's always better ways that we can do with sharing this learning. The critical instance side of this is very new. I'm talking about, we've only really got the process in place probably in the last 2 months around critical instance. Serious instance, we've had a very clear process in place, and it's very obvious what is a serious incident. Generally it's patients have, caused severe harm to themselves, or they have died unfortunately, or it's been a never event are 3 main areas for serious incidents, or fractured neck of femurs that require surgical repair. Surgical repair for fractured neck of femur are the sort of main 4 areas that we do. Like say, secure services have a few. Secure services have a few others that may keep us on our toes just for what they have to cope with. But they're the sort of main ones for serious incidents, and we've had really clear processes and really detailed reports. But over the last couple of months, we've really been clearer now about critical incidents and what we need to do. And we do think there's wider learning. Hopefully as well, like I said, the feedback loop on Datex will tell you what learning has been taken forward, but also because we're now reporting every single serious incident and every critical incident is going through Datex and all the information's on there, we're now also looking at themes and trends to come out of it as well. So we can now start pulling reports to say we've had 3 catheterisation probably is quite common, across our community health services. How often is duty of candour applied? That's the first one I've ever known. There may be others that we need to learn from. So that is sort of some of the scenarios that we will take forward to suddenly say we've had this situation, and we'll take it forward through the quality newsletters and any other way that people can think of really. But we need your feedback as to what would be the most use to getting that learning and feedback. But if in doubt, the best thing to do is to contact either myself or Chris Bradley Rush or just the SI team, or Katrina King and the Datex team. And like I said, we discuss it every Monday. So thank you for your time.